Star Trek, Primitive Passenger, Season 5, Episode 8. The Harsh Cardassian Sun. The harsh Cardassian sun beat down on the dilapidated warehouse, its metal walls scarred by recent conflict. Nolan Mercer stood beside Vela Mestat, squinting against the glare as they surveyed the building's exterior. The Cardassian anthropologist's shoulders slumped slightly, her usually impeccable posture betraying the weight of recent events. "It's not much to look at," Vela said, her voice tinged with melancholy. "But inside is a treasure trove of Bajoran history, a history we had no right to take." Nolan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And now we're doing the right thing, returning it. That's got to count for something." Vela managed a small smile. "Perhaps. Though it feels like too little, too late." She keyed in a code, and the warehouse door groaned open. "Shall we?" They stepped inside, and Nolan's eyes widened at the chaos before him. Crates, artifacts, and various items were piled haphazardly on long shelves of standard pallet tracking, with no apparent organization. Dust coated everything, testament to years of neglect. "Good grief," Nolan muttered. "This is going to be quite the job." Vela's face flushed slightly. "I apologize for the state of things. The military government, they didn't care. To them, these were just spoils of war, not priceless cultural artifacts." Nolan waved off her apology. "No need for that. Let's get this precious cargo into the sky, huh?" He tapped his comm badge. "Mercer to cargo ship Navarro. Prepare for mass transport of warehouse contents." As they waited for the transport to begin, Vela turned to Nolan. "Thank you for doing this personally, Mr. Mercer. I know you must have countless other commitments." Nolan's eyes scanned the warehouse, his mind already calculating the logistics of the transfer. "This is important. For Bajor, for Cardassia, hell, for the whole quadrant. Sometimes you've got to do things yourself to make sure they're done right." A slight shimmer filled the air as the transporter beam began to take effect. Slowly, the contents of the warehouse began to dematerialize. Vela watched the process, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and hope. She turned to Nolan, her voice soft but intense. "Mr. Mercer, I need you to understand something." Nolan raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's that?" "These artifacts," Vela said, gesturing to the fading items. "They're not just objects. They're vessels of memory, of identity. Each one carries a piece of Bajor's soul." She paused, her eyes meeting Nolan's. "In returning them, you're not just transporting relics. You're carrying the weight of an entire people's history." Nolan nodded slowly, the gravity of her words sinking in. Vela continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Be prepared, Mr. Mercer. Sometimes, when we bear witness to history, it leaves its mark on us. The past has a way of awakening things within us we never knew existed." "Good luck, Mr. Mercer," she finished softly. "And thank you truly." Nolan nodded, a half-smile on his face, though his eyes betrayed a hint of unease at her words. "Take care, Vela. Keep up the good work here." In a shimmer of light, Nolan found himself aboard the Navarro, named after one of the only guitar players he could remember from when he was alive. Surrounded by the newly transported contents of the warehouse, he took a deep breath, the musty smell of long-forgotten artifacts filling his nostrils. "Well," he said out loud, looking up, "let's get this show on the road." Just habit after so many years chatting with Alara. The cargo ship's engines hummed to life, and soon they were breaking Cardassian orbit, setting a course for Bajor. Mercer liked the tactile experience of seeing the planet fall away and maneuvering around moons and planetary defense systems, provided by Mercer. Industries, of course. It's something he didn't get when Alara was driving and blinking from point to point. Nolan settled into the pilot's seat, inputting the coordinates and engaging the warp drive. As the stars streaked by outside the view screen, Nolan found his mind wandering. The journey to Bajor wasn't particularly long, but without his usual company. No crew, no Alara. The silence of space seemed to press in around him. Warp seemed Brutalluslow. Oh, Hours ticked by. Nolan checked and rechecked the ship's systems, more out of boredom than necessity. Finally, restlessness got the better of him. He stood, stretching muscles stiff from inactivity, and made his way toward the cargo hold. "Might as well take a look at what we're carrying," he muttered to himself as he keyed open the door to the hold. The vastness of the cargo area stretched out before him, filled with the jumbled contents of the Cardassian warehouse. Crates, statues, paintings, and artifacts of all descriptions crowded the space. Nolan stepped inside, his curiosity piqued by the treasures surrounding him. Thus, Nolan carefully picked his way through the cluttered cargo hold, his eyes roving over the eclectic collection of Bajoran artifacts. The sheer volume and variety of items were overwhelming, a true testament to the efficiency and thoroughness of Cardassian plundering during the occupation. "Central Command will be pleased," he said aloud, remembering the words from those times. They didn't take these items for their cultural value, or even their melt value. The Cardassians pillaged these items simply because it hurt the Bajorans, to crush their spirits, to break their hearts. As he navigated around a precarious stack of crates, his foot caught on something. He stumbled, inadvertently jostling a nearby pile of smaller objects. There was a soft thud, followed by the muffled sound of something rolling across the metal floor. Nolan turned, his eyes tracking the source of the noise. A small, egg-shaped object wrapped in ornate silken cloth had come to rest at his feet. Curious, he bent down to pick it up. The fabric was soft and intricately woven, its patterns unlike anything he'd seen before. As he cradled the object in his hands, he could feel a slight warmth emanating from within, as if it held its own inner life. "And who are you?" Nolan murmured, his fingers working to unwrap the mysterious item. As the last fold of fabric fell away, Nolan's breath caught in his throat. The object in his hands began to glow, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. Recognition dawned on him. This was no ordinary artifact. "Orb," he whispered, his voice a mix of awe and terror. The glow intensified, filling the cargo hold with a soft, pulsating light. Nolan felt a strange sensation, as if the very air around him was charged with energy. He tried to let go of it, he tried to put it down, but something held him transfixed. Suddenly, the light from the orb flared brightly. Nolan squinted against the glare, raising his free hand to shield his eyes. When he looked again, he was no longer alone in the cargo hold. 3 more orbs had risen from their hiding places among the jumbled artifacts. They hovered in the air, their combined glow creating a dazzling display that lit up the entire hold. Nolan stood frozen. The first orb seemed to lift from his hands as the others slowly began to revolve around him. He could feel a building pressure in the air, a sense of falling away, reality slipping. "Oh, she..." Nolan began, but his words were cut off as the world around him dissolved into a blinding white light. In that moment, as reality itself seemed to shift and warp around him, Nolan Mercer found himself on the threshold of an experience that would shake the very foundations of his being. The orbs of the prophets had chosen their moment, and Nolan was powerless to resist their pull. The blinding light enveloped Nolan, and for a moment he felt as if he were floating in a sea of nothingness. Then, abruptly, the world solidified around him once more. But it wasn't the cargo hold of his ship. Nolan found himself again standing in front of the dilapidated warehouse, the harsh Cardassian sun blazing down upon him like fire. A vast, otherworldly space surrounded him and the warehouse. The ground beneath his feet seemed to shift and swirl with ethereal energies. Before he could fully process his surroundings, figures began to materialize around him. They appeared human at first glance, but there was something unmistakably alien about them. Their features kept shifting, one moment familiar, the next completely foreign. One of the beings stepped forward, its form settling briefly into the appearance of Mestat. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Mercer. Another being, this one resembling a Bajoran Vedek, responded. He had the partition. Because of the partition, a third chimed in, its form flickering between that of a Cardassian and a Bajoran. Nolan's head spun, trying to make sense of their cryptic words, the heat almost unbearable. What partition? What are you talking about? The beings seemed to ignore his questions, continuing their disjointed conversation. That's why he did it. And he knows he did it, the first being said, its voice hauntingly, akin to Vela Mestat. But not a memory, another questioned. He knows, but not a memory, came the response. Because of the partition, they all said in unison. Nolan felt a growing sense of unease. What do I know? What did I do? Suddenly, the scene around him changed. He was no longer in the Cardassian sun, but standing on a battlefield. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of weapons fire. All around him, soldiers fought and died. With a jolt of horror, Nolan realized he recognized this place, this moment. No, he whispered, this can't be. But it was. He was reliving a battle from the Mestat Wars, the conflict in which he had commanded for the Encanite for nearly 2 centuries. Only now, he wasn't watching from afar or through the detached interface of a command pod. He was there, in the thick of it, experiencing every terrible moment with horrifying clarity. The beings' voices echoed in his mind. It's unjust, incomplete. As Nolan watched, helpless, as the battle raged around him, he felt something within his mind begin to crack. Memories, long suppressed or hidden, began to flood back. Every decision, every casualty, every moment of the 180 years he spent as the Encanite's weapon of war came crashing down upon him. No, please, Nolan begged, falling to his knees amidst the chaos. Don't make me remember. I can't. But the flood of memories couldn't be stopped. The partition in his mind, whatever it had been, was shattering. Nolan clutched his head, overwhelmed by the torrent of experiences and emotions. It's unjust, incomplete, the beings repeated, their voices growing louder. Now it is complete. The battlefield faded away, replaced once more by the brutal Cardassian sun. Nolan remained on his knees, shaking, as the full weight of his past settled upon him, the Vedek-like being approached, its form solidifying. You understand now, it said, not a question but a statement. Now it is complete. Nolan looked up, his eyes filled with anguish. Why? Why show me this? Mercer is of time. Your path is long, the Vedek being added. It stretches behind and before. As suddenly as it had begun, the experience came to an end. The beings faded away, and Nolan found himself back in the cargo hold of his ship, the 4 orbs gently lowering themselves back into their resting places among the artifacts. Nolan collapsed to the floor, his mind reeling from what he had just experienced. The weight of centuries of memories, actions, and consequences pressed down upon him. He was Nolan Mercer, but he was also the ruthless commander of the Encanite forces. He was a man out of time, a being shaped by forces beyond his understanding. As he lay there, trying to process the flood of memories and revelations, one thing became crystal clear. Nothing would ever be the same. For what felt like hours, Nolan remained on the cold floor of the cargo hold, his body racked with silent sobs. The centuries of memory pressed down on him, each recollection a fresh wound in his psyche. The sterile air of the ship seemed to choke him, filled with the phantom sense of long-ago battlefields. Finally, exhaustion overtook him, and he drifted into a fitful sleep right there among the artifacts. When Nolan awoke, he found himself disoriented. For a moment, he couldn't remember where or when he was. Was he in the command pod of the Encanite vessel, on a battlefield in the Mestat Wars, or was he back on Earth when he was alive before everything changed? Reality slowly reasserted itself as he took in his surroundings. The cargo hold, the artifacts, Bajor, the mission. Nolan pushed himself up, his body protesting every movement. He felt ancient, worn down by the weight of his newly restored memories. His hand brushed against something soft, the ornate fabric that had wrapped the first orb. He recoiled from it as if burned. Stumbling to his feet, Nolan made his way back to the ship's bridge. The view screen showed the streaking stars of warp travel. Bajor was still hours away. He collapsed into the pilot's seat, his mind a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts and emotions. "Computer," he croaked, his voice hoarse. "How long was I in the cargo hold?" "You were in the cargo hold for 5 hours, 37 minutes, the computer's emotionless voice replied. Nolan let out a bitter laugh. Less than 6 hours. In less than 6 hours, he and his entire world had been turned inside out. Everything he thought he knew about himself, every action he'd taken since awakening on the Strouch, now had to be re-examined through the lens of his complete memories. 6 hours to drown in 200 years of memories. He thought of the people he'd encountered over the years. La'an, Captain Pike, the crew of DS9, even the Bajorans who had begun to revere him for his help in rebuilding. What would they think if they knew the full truth? The blood on his hands wasn't metaphorical anymore. He could almost feel it, a wet, sticky, permanent stain on his soul. As Bajor grew closer, Nolan knew he had a choice to make. He could try to bury this knowledge, to go on as he had before, or he could confront it head-on, face the consequences of his actions, both past and present. The comm system chirped, startling him out of his brooding thoughts. "Bajorn, control to cargo vessel," a voice came through. "Please identify yourself and state your purpose." Nolan took a deep breath, steeling himself. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't run from this, not anymore. "This is Nolan Mercer, on the Navarro," he responded, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I'm carrying a shipment of returned artifacts from Cardassia, requesting permission to enter Bajoran space." As he waited for a response, Nolan's gaze drifted back to the cargo hold. The orbs were in there, silent now, but their impact lingered. They had shown him the truth of who he was, for better or worse. Cargo vessel, you are cleared for entry into Bajoran space." The officer's voice crackled through the comm. "Proceed to the designated coordinates for customs inspection." Nolan acknowledged the instructions, his fingers moving automatically over the controls. His mind, however, was elsewhere. The weight of his cargo, both physical and metaphorical, pressed heavily upon him. He cleared his throat, wincing at the soreness. "Bajoran Control, I have an additional request." There was a pause before the officer responded. "Go ahead, Mr. Stabel." Mercer. Nolan took a deep breath, his body protesting even this simple action. Every muscle, every joint seemed to cry out in protest, as if he had physically endured the centuries of warfare he now remembered. "I need to speak with Colonel Kira Nerys. It's urgent." Another pause, longer this time. "Stand by." As he waited, Nolan's eyes drifted closed. Behind his eyelids, he saw flashes of battles, of decisions made, lives ended. He snapped them open again, heart racing. The comm crackled to life once more. "Mr. Mercer, I have Colonel Kira for you." "Mercer?" Kira's familiar voice filled the bridge. "What's going on? Is everything all right with the artifacts?" Nolan swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Colonel Kira, the artifacts are fine, but—" He trailed off, unsure how to continue. Mercer." Kira's tone sharpened with concern. "What is it?" "I found something among the artifacts. Something important." Nolan's voice was barely above a whisper. "Orbs, Kira. 4 of them." The silence that followed was deafening. When Kira spoke again, her voice was filled with a mix of awe and disbelief. "Are you certain?" "Very," Nolan replied, a bitter chuckle escaping his lips. They made quite an impression." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the comm. Kira understood the implication immediately. "You had an orb experience?" "Yeah," Nolan confirmed, his voice rough. "Prophets," Kira breathed. Then, her tone shifting to one of decisive action, "Mercer, I'm going to reroute you. Bring your ship directly to the capital. I'll have a team ready to receive the orbs." Nolan nodded, forgetting for a moment that Kira couldn't see him. Understood. As he adjusted his course, following the new coordinates Kira sent through, Nolan felt a mix of relief and trepidation. The orbs would soon be out of his hands, but the impact of their presence lingered. His body ached, his mind reeled, and the future seemed to rest on the next second, and the next, and the next, the green and brown planet of Bay. Somewhere down there, people were scrambling to prepare for his arrival, to welcome home their lost orbs. They had no idea of the turmoil their sacred artifacts had unleashed within him. As he began the landing sequence, Nolan steeled himself for what was to come. The orbs had forced him to confront his past. Now he would have to face the present, and whatever future lay ahead. Sturdy rest. The cargo ship touched down on the landing pad with a gentle thud. Through the view screen, Nolan could see a flurry of activity as Bajoran officials and Vedeks hurried across the tarmac. At the forefront of the group, he recognized the familiar figure of Colonel Kira Nerys. For a moment, Nolan remained seated, his hands gripping the controls tightly. The thought of facing people, of having to explain what had happened, sent a wave of anxiety through him, but there was no avoiding it now. With a groan, he pushed himself to his feet. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through his body, as if the weight of his memories had manifested physically. He made his way to the airlock, each step an effort of will. As the door hissed open, the warm Bajoran air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of unfamiliar flowers. Nolan blinked in the bright sunlight, holding up a hand to block the glare, momentarily disoriented. "Mercer," Kira's voice cut through his daze. She stood at the foot of the ramp, her expression a mix of concern and barely contained excitement. "Are you all right?" Nolan descended the ramp. "I've had better days, Colonel." As he reached the bottom, Kira stepped closer, lowering her voice. "The orbs." "In the cargo hold," Nolan replied, gesturing back towards the ship, "along with the rest of the artifacts." Kira nodded, then turned to the assembled group. "Vedek Telas, please oversee the transfer of the orbs. The rest of you, begin cataloging and transferring the other artifacts." As the Bajorans moved towards the ship, Kira gently took Nolan's arm. "Come on, let's get you somewhere quiet." Nolan, still mostly blinded in the sunlight, didn't resist as Kira led him away from the landing pad and into a nearby building. The cool interior was a welcome relief from the Bajoran sun. Kira guided him to a small, sparsely furnished room and helped him into a chair. "Now," she said, taking a seat across from him, "tell me what happened." Nolan took a deep breath, wincing at the pain in his chest. "I was in the cargo hold, just looking around. One of the orbs, it rolled out. When I picked it up, it started glowing. Then the others, they all activated." Kira leaned forward, her eyes wide. "The orb of orbs. It calls all orbs to activate. It's been missing for over 1,000 years. Nolan's gaze became distant. "Everything, Kira. I saw everything." As Nolan began to recount his experience, his voice trembling with the effort, Kira listened intently. He told her about the beings, their cryptic words, the flood of memories. With each word, the weight of his experiences seemed to press down on him even more. "They said I was of time," Nolan finished, his voice barely above a whisper, "that my path stretches behind and before. But how can I move forward, Kira? How can I live with all of this?" Kira was silent for a long moment, processing everything she'd heard. Finally, she reached out, placing a hand on Nolan's arm. "I can't begin to imagine, Mercer. If they showed you these things, it's because you needed to see them." Nolan let out a bitter laugh. "I'm not sure I agree with their judgment on that." "Maybe not now," Kira said softly. "But in time, you'll understand why." There was a commotion outside. The door burst open, and a young Bajoran aide rushed in, his face flushed with excitement. "Colonel, Vedek Telas sent me. The orbs. They're the orbs of wisdom, memory, destiny, and another we haven't figured out yet. We thought they were lost forever." Kira's eyes widened in amazement. She turned back to Nolan, a look of awe on her face. "Do you understand what this means, Mercer? You've just changed the course of Bajoran history." "The Orb of Orbs," Nolan said, just loud enough for the aide to hear. As the young aide's excited words faded, Nolan felt a crushing weight settle over him. The revelation about the Orb's identities seemed to mock him, a cruel joke at his expense. He barely registered Kira dismissing the aide, his mind lost in a swirl of dark thoughts. "Mercer?" Kira's voice cut through his haze. "What is it?" Nolan looked up, his eyes haunted. "Don't you see, Kira? It's all a cosmic joke. The Orb of Orbs, activating the others. It's like the universe is playing some sick game with me." Kira's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "The Encanite, the prophets. They both chose me because I was broken," Nolan said, his voice hollow. "The Encanite fixed me by unleashing my savagery. The prophets fixed me by forcing me to confront it. Different means, same end." He let out a bitter laugh. "I woke up human on the Strouch all those years ago. But now I'm what the Encanite made me, what the prophets revealed me to be. A monster draped in human flesh." Kira leaned forward, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Mercer, you're not—" "Save it, Colonel." Nolan cut her off, his tone sharp. "You didn't see what I saw. You don't know what I've done." A heavy silence fell between them. Nolan could see Kira struggling to find the right words, but he knew there were none. Nothing could erase the truth of centuries of violence and destruction. Finally, Nolan stood, his body protesting every movement. "I need to go. There are things I need to take care of." Kira rose as well, concern etched on her face. "Mercer, maybe you should stay. We could consult with the Vedeks, try to make sense of your experience." Nolan shook his head. No, I can't be here right now. I need to go." Without waiting for a response, Nolan turned and walked out of the room. He made his way back to his ship like a blind man in the sun, ignoring the bustling activity around the artifacts. "Prophets be appraised, Nolan Mercer." The excited Vedek chattered away about the returned orbs. None of it mattered, not anymore. As he settled into the pilot's seat, Nolan set a course for Empire North and beamed the rest of the artifacts and Vedeks and helpers onto the flight deck. A few stunned faces looked his way. The familiar act of piloting did little to calm the storm raging within him. His fingers twitched restlessly on the controls, his mind unable to focus on the task at hand. The journey passed in a blur of conflicting emotions and fragmented memories. By the time Empire North came into view, Nolan's nerves were frayed to the breaking point. As he docked, Alara's voice came over the comm. "Welcome back, Nolan. How did the delivery go?" Nolan flinched at the sound, his response coming out as a harsh bark. "Fine. It's done." He could almost hear Alara's surprise at his tone, but he couldn't bring himself to care. He stormed off the ship, his body thrumming with nervous energy. The familiar corridors of Empire North felt suffocating. Nolan paced through them, unable to settle in any one place for more than a few moments. His office, usually a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. He found himself picking up objects, only to set them down again immediately, his mind too chaotic to focus on any single task. A junior officer approached him with a datapad. "Sir, we have some reports that need your—" "Not now." Nolan snapped, causing the officer to recoil. He immediately felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly swallowed by the maelstrom of his emotions. Hours passed in this fashion. Nolan prowled the station like a caged animal, snapping at anyone who dared approach him. He tried to work, to lose himself in the mundane tasks of running his empire, but his mind refused to cooperate. Every report, every decision, every conversation only served to remind him of the weight of his past actions. In the operations center, he found himself staring at the stellar map, his eyes drawn to the empty spaces between systems. The vast, quiet voids called to him, offering an escape from the noise in his head. "Nolan?" Ilara's voice startled him. He hadn't realized she had followed him. "What's wrong?" You're not acting like yourself." Nolan turned to her, his eyes empty. "Myself? I don't." Ilara's face pulled with concern. "What happened on Bajor? Did something go wrong with the delivery?" "Wrong?" Nolan let out a bitter laugh. "No, nothing went wrong. Everything went exactly as it was supposed to." He turned back to the map, his fingers tracing the empty spaces. I can't do this right now, Ilara. I can't be here. I can't be anywhere." "Nolan, you're not making sense." "Maybe if you tell me what happened." "Ilara." He couldn't look at her. Quietly he said, "I know." He turned and faced her. "I know." He could feel himself breaking. He couldn't. He just couldn't. "No, I can't. I can't talk about it. I can't think about it. I need to go." Without another word, Nolan stormed out of the operations center. His feet carried him to the Lost, his mind barely registering the journey. As he settled into the pilot's seat, his eyes fell on the navigation console, what is now known as the Nekrit Expanse, a vast, empty region of the Delta Quadrant. No planets, no stations, no people, just nothing. Nolan and Ilara had created it an eternity ago. His fingers moved almost of their own accord, plotting a course. As the ship disengaged from the docking clamps, Nolan felt a moment of clarity amidst the chaos of his thoughts. He needed to be alone, truly, completely alone. As Empire North receded in his view screen, Nolan set his blink coordinates. The Nekrit Expanse awaited, a void to match the one he felt inside. Perhaps there, in the emptiness, he could find a way to live with the monster he now knew himself to be. Thost, the Lost, dropped out of warp at the edge of the Nekrit Expanse. Nolan stared out at the vast emptiness before him, a fitting mirror to the void he felt within. Without a word, he guided the ship deeper into the expanse, until the stars themselves seemed to thin out, leaving nothing but darkness. Here, in the middle of nothing, Nolan finally brought the Lost to a stop. For a long moment he sat motionless in the pilot's seat, his eyes unfocused, seeing not the view screen before him but the horrors of his past. With mechanical movements, he rose and made his way to the small living quarters. There, he stripped off his clothes and stepped into the sonic shower, as if he could somehow cleanse himself of the weight of his memories. But no matter how long he stood there, the feeling of drowning in blood remained. Dressed in simple, loose clothing, Nolan returned to the bridge. He slumped into the chair, his eyes roving over the familiar controls of the Lost. How many times had this ship been his sanctuary? "Computer," he said, his voice hoarse. "Deactivate all non-essential systems. Maintain life support at minimum levels." The lights dimmed, and the usual hum of the ship's systems faded to complete silence. In the quiet darkness, Nolan closed his eyes, finally allowing the flood of memories to wash over him. Images flashed through his mind, battles fought centuries ago, decisions made in the heat of war, lives snuffed out at his command. He saw faces, aliens he'd never met, species long extinct, all casualties of the conflicts he'd orchestrated for the Encanite. Hours bled into days, days into weeks. Nolan barely moved from his spot on the bridge, sustaining himself with occasional ration bars and sips of water. Sleep came in fitful bursts, often interrupted by vivid nightmares that left him gasping and drenched in sweat. He lost all sense of time. In the unchanging darkness of the Nekrit Expanse, past and present blurred together. Sometimes, in his more lucid moments, Nolan wondered if he was still in the Encanite command pod, if everything since had been some elaborate hallucination. But always the memories returned. The relentless grip of history pushed his breath from him, each recollection adding to the burden. He relived every battle, every decision, every life lost because of him. And with each remembrance came the crushing realization this was who he truly was. A weapon, a monster, a bringer of death on a scale few could comprehend. In the vast emptiness of the Nekrit Expanse, Nolan Mercer faced his demons. And in the silence, broken only by his ragged breathing and occasional sobs, he grappled with the hardest question of all. How does one live with the knowledge of such horrors? How does one move forward when the past is an ocean of blood? The darkness of space offered no answers, only a mirror to the darkness within his soul. Epilogue. Empire North hangs in the vacuum of space as ships large and small wait their turn to dock, while others simply park and beam cargo to the station. The bustling promenade of Empire North hummed with activity. Traders haggled over prices, off-duty crew members lounged in the various establishments. The constant ebb and flow of people continued unabated under neon lights, as scents of a dozen foods battled for supremacy. Above it all, on the upper level, Ilara stood motionless. Her eyes, usually bright with curiosity and intelligence, were distant as she gazed out the viewport into the star-studded blackness of space. Though the station carried on as usual in Nolan's absence, there was a tension in Ilara's stance, a worry etched into her features that belied the normalcy below. As the scene fades to black, the unspoken question hangs in the air. What will become of Nolan Mercer?